Okay, good morning. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jessyn Farrell. I am the director of the Office of Sustainability and Environment, and I am so excited to be here today. I am going to say a few things of introduction, and then we will kick it over to our speakers. So let's go ahead and get underway. I would first like to start by welcoming and introducing our Mayor of Seattle, Bruce Harrell. Let's give him a big round of applause for being here today. And behind me, we have some fantastic advocates and representatives of key stakeholder groups. We have Patience Malaba from HDC. Let's give her a round of applause. We have Kelly Hall from Climate Solutions. Let's give her a round of applause. Katie Garrow from MLK Labor Council. We are so excited she's here. Let's give her a round of applause. And we have several other representatives of stakeholders. We have Seattle Public Schools represented, Shift Zero, we have Sierra Club, and many others. Let's give them a round of applause as well. And finally, I just want to say a huge thank you to Office of Sustainability and Environment staff who have done so much over so many years to lift this policy off the ground. So let's give them a round of applause as well. So we are here today to introduce Seattle's Building Emission Performance Standard. This is truly one of the biggest steps we can take to reduce climate emissions in our city. I want a round of applause for that as well. And I'm going to just say a few things about what this emissions policy does, and then we will pass it over to our other speakers. So a few things to know. This policy was developed over 3 years with literally hundreds of conversations from key stakeholders, including building owners, environmental activists, scientists, environmental justice activists, a whole affordable housing representatives, labor representatives. And we are here today with a policy that complements our state policy on buildings, which is something we heard loud and clear. This policy has flexibility so that all the different ways and nuances that building owners have, they will be able to achieve our climate goals around this flexibility. It advances a One Seattle approach to climate, to climate justice, which is to say, we are advancing a green and equitable economy. We are ensuring a just transition from fossil fuels. And because climate change is upon us, we are building in resilience into the policies we do. And this policy checks all of those boxes. So we're thrilled about that. Woo! Thank you for that. That's right. Finally, and importantly, this policy is about reducing emissions. And that is exactly what this does. As I mentioned, it will reduce emissions from our building sector by 27% and is truly one of the most impactful things that we can do. So this is in response to Seattle residents saying they want climate action now. That is what we are doing. We are taking a step forward today. And I am so excited to introduce our mayor, who is truly a champion of reducing climate emissions in an equitable way. And so without further ado, I am going to introduce Mayor Bruce Harrell.
Thank you, Jessyn. You know, when Jessyn joined the city, as a former elected leader, as a climate change warrior, as a leader, I said very simply, be bold. Be bold, follow best practices, and hire some of the best talent, and push us, and if we take the hits, I'll take the hit. But be bold and be daring, and that's what we're here to celebrate and start to work on relative to greenhouse gas emissions. We're standing here at Cary Park so you can sort of visually see what everyone's excited about this. What we're grappling with. We know that the fastest growing source of climate pollution are large buildings. Our commercial buildings are responsible for 1/3 of Seattle's greenhouse gas emissions. We understand that, and we understand that at a time when we're still trying to incentivize economic development and jobs. And so we're looking for solutions, climate solutions, to fight to save our planet and our air and our water, climate solutions that also shows our ability to create jobs. That's what this Building Emissions Performance Standard does, otherwise and affectionately known as BEPS. So when I say BEPS, you know what I'm talking about. Through this proposed policy, we as a city, we as Seattle, will implement some of the strongest building performance standards in the country. That's the work we're trying to do. While there are regulations in place to address emissions in new buildings, as you can see behind us, we have many existing buildings that need a trajectory toward a clean energy future. That's what this work does. This legislation is among the most impactful proposals we can advance to reduce emissions. As simple as that. This is putting our values that we hear talked about all the time into real action. This is the hard work, quite candidly, that some people may not understand that we must do to save our planet, to save our air, to clean our air, and to clean our water. Now, here at Cary Park, which I think many of you've if anyone's run for office, they always stand here and get this shot for some reason. You see it on every brochure. We're standing by this beautiful skyline, but it's hard not to notice another thing we sort of like, but sometimes because it becomes a problem: the heat. This summer, we are projected to have more extreme heat and more fire and smoke risk, becoming the new normal for our residents. We all know the health implications that this presents. So we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change and build resilience among our communities in the face of these climate impacts. Now, investments in energy efficiency and clean energy, if done right, the way we are presenting in our BEPS plan, will also, as I said earlier, create local, well-paying jobs at many levels. From insulation contractors to roofers and electricians to sheet metal workers, engineers and architects. And you'll hear from some of these gifted speakers standing with me today to talk about those impacts. These are high quality jobs that cannot be outsourced and will directly benefit Seattle area workers and residents. Now, we should make it clear on this bold plan we're proposing that fewer than 10 North American cities have enacted this kind of policy. Adopting a building performance standards is vital to Seattle's continued global leadership in climate action. And we're very proud of the fact, I should say, that we have been recognized internationally for the work that we're doing. Working as one Seattle, and I will repeat that, despite criticisms. In one Seattle, we are not perfect. We will argue, we will disagree, but at the end of the day, we will conclude that we are fighting for this beautiful city that we all love, and that is why we are here. And I will continue to say that loudly and unambiguously. Working as one Seattle, we'll continue to drive innovation with our carbon neutral utility, the Seattle City Light, the Department of Construction and Inspections, and other relevant departments to ensure this transition is equitable and effective. In closing, before I turn it back to Jessyn, we can't emphasize enough the collaborative nature of this effort. This was not a top-down effort. That's one Seattle. These folks standing with me are leaders, respective leaders. It is not my job as mayor to speak over them, or to punch down to them, or to punch across from them. It is my job to listen to them and help them lead. We've centered the voice of community leaders committed to doing this work. That's one Seattle, and that's what BEPS. It sort of rolls off the tongue after you say it for a couple of times. That's what BEPS presents. Seattle at its finest, fighting for the planet, fighting for our people, fighting for jobs in one bold action. Again, I want to thank Jessyn, Farrell, and the group, Sandra and others. I shouldn't call one person out. Now your other employees are going to be a little upset. But we do know you put in the hard work. She has an injury because of the work. That's how we do it here. But I can't thank the departments and community leaders for presenting this plan that everyone in this city should be excited about. Jessyn, take it from here.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Harrell. I would now like to welcome Kelly Hall, who is the Washington State Director of Climate Solutions.
Hey, Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. As Jessyn said, my name is Kelly Hall. I'm the Washington Director at Climate Solutions, and I am just so proud to be standing up here supporting Mayor Harrell and the Office of Sustainability in the work on this really important policy. You know, the mayor said it, but it's worth reiterating that emissions from our homes and buildings have grown at a faster rate than any other sector in Washington state. That's largely due to an increased reliance on fossil gas in our homes and buildings. The state has already made a commitment moving forward that all new buildings will be built right the first time. We're just going to build them right from the get-go, and that's with clean, efficient heat pumps that rely largely on clean electricity that we have here in Seattle. However, over the last few decades, we've built a lot of buildings with fossil fuels, and so now those buildings and homes are largely reliant on fossil fuels. What this policy that the city of Seattle is proposing will do is really get at those existing buildings now. We've figured new buildings out, but it's really time to transition all of these buildings that you can see here that we spend the vast majority of our time in, making sure that the indoor air quality is clean, making sure that they're not relying on fossil fuels. When this policy passes, Seattle will be a leader in clean buildings policy. This is going to set a precedent both in the state and nationwide for cities to really follow the lead of the city of Seattle. This is a huge deal for our communities, it's a huge deal for our health, and it's a huge deal for climate. And I couldn't be more proud to stand up here and support this policy. As this policy moves into the next phase, we look forward to really working with the Seattle City Council to ensure that the policy passes in its strongest possible form, a form that is equitable, a form that is effective, and a form that is enforceable so that Seattle can truly see the benefits of these deep emissions reductions that we need to make sure that our tenants, our building occupants, our workers, and our building users are safe and healthy. So again, I want to thank the mayor and the Office of Sustainability for their leadership on this policy. We are proud to support it and really look forward to working with the council to make sure that it passes.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I would now like to welcome Patience Malaba with HDC.
Thank you. Good morning. As Jessyn introduced me, I am Patience Malaba, the Executive Director of the Housing Development Consortium. We are a membership association of major affordable housing developers and providers across the King County region. And first of all, I will say this. I stand before you to emphasize the need for housing solutions that embrace social justice and environmental sustainability. It is important to recognize that affordable housing is critical, as is addressing the ever-growing climate crisis that we are in. Neither of these issues can be solved on their own without the other being solved simultaneously. We can no longer operate in a place where affordable housing and climate change issues are treated separately. Instead, we must address them all together and adopt systemic approaches that can really get to the root of the challenges that we face. So I stand here to extend my gratitude to Mayor Harrell, to Director Farrell, and the OSE team for advancing the building emissions performance standards, the BEPS, forward, because this is critical legislation to make sure that larger existing buildings can begin to move forward in reducing climate pollution that we've continued to see. We know that the impact from climate pollution currently disproportionately impacts first and worst the most vulnerable people in our community. And today, as we stand here, we're in a point where our values come together. This is one of the moments where we can celebrate taking a big leap forward in legislation that addresses affordable housing, racial equity, and climate change. I am proud of the work that we've done. Over the past almost 2 years, we've spent time with the OSE team, sometimes butting heads, sometimes agreeing, and getting to a place where we developed building emissions performance standards that support affordable housing. And that is the kind of leadership that is appreciated and needed in our community as we stand. In that work, we were towing a line because we know that affordable housing projects, their building portfolios, operate within very tight budget margins. And yet we live in the sense of urgency that recognizes that the fuse is short and burning on climate change. The clock is ticking, and it is incumbent upon all of us that we truly take action to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions over the next decade. So with that, I also want to appreciate the extensive work and recognition by the city to include in the legislation alternative compliance options that provide flexibility for building owners. I also want to recognize the efforts by the city to make available financial resources to support affordable housing decarbonization. And as we speak, we're looking within as an association to launch the capacity of our members to be able to lead on decarbonization. We know the time for action is now. The urgent challenges that we face call on all of us as a generation to effectively address them. And together, we stand here on a united front to pave a path for a healthy, equitable, and resilient future. Thank you.
Thank you, Patience. And I would like to now introduce Katie Garrow, who is with MLK Labor. We are so excited that she is here.
Good morning, brothers, sisters, siblings. Thank you to the members of the broadcast and print media, union members of SAG-AFTRA, of IATSE, of the Communications Workers of America, and IBEW 46 for covering this story and for the work you do to keep our democracy alive. My name is Katie Garrow. I'm the Executive Secretary Treasurer at MLK Labor. MLK Labor is the umbrella organization for unions here in King County. We represent more than 150 unions and 150,000 unionized workers in Seattle and King County. I am here today because as a Central Labor Council, we support common sense Green New Deal policies like the Building Emissions Performance Standards for carbon pollution. And we thank Mayor Harrell for his leadership and Jessyn Farrell and her team to get us this far. Union members have noticed climate change is real and it is here in Seattle. We have had to learn a whole new vocabulary. When a wildfire last summer caused purple air days, teachers reported smoke came right into their schools and filled their classrooms and hallways. When we broke record heat temperatures during our heat dome in June of 2021, in-home caregivers suffered alongside those that they care for. UPS package delivery drivers have reported that their trucks reach higher than 130-degree temperatures on hot summer days when they provide deliveries. But as a labor movement, we have hope and we have a vision that we can build a greener economy that works better for workers. Mayor Harrell's Building Performance Standards policy is forecasted to create hundreds of good jobs over the lifespan of this policy in the green economy, which will benefit Seattle area workers and can expand career pathways for women and people of color while reducing a major source of carbon pollution in our city. As we do this, it is of the utmost importance that while we transition away from fossil fuels, we remember that the workers who are in the existing natural gas industry need a just transition to a better or equal job in the green new economy. I say that because that's my lived experience. I am from Grays Harbor County, Washington. I was born and raised in a place where logging was the lifeblood of the community that I grew up in until the 1980s, when the forests were laid bare, the natural resources had been dried up. No new industry came to my town. Unemployment was high, spirits were low. Our dads treated their despair with the same drugs they used from the back pain and the injuries that they received doing back-breaking labor. King County has so many opportunities that the community I come from did not have. There is more money here than God. There is no reason that as we regulate the carbon economy, as we regulate fossil fuels, that we should not also encumber this new work in the green economy with regulations like prevailed rates, licensing standards, and safety requirements, so that new jobs in the green economy provide for good family wage careers. Thank you again, Mayor Harrell, for your leadership in taking this very important step forward. We look forward to continuing to partner with you to bring a Green New Deal to Seattle and its residents. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you so much to all of our attendees and the stakeholders who participated. This concludes our program. We are happy to take questions from the press. And I know there's also going to be a photo opportunity. So I will defer to our picture first or questions?
Let's do questions.
Okay, we are going to do questions. All right.
I'll go.
Great.
What generally are the conversions that these existing buildings are going to need to have the most impact?
So I may defer to our policy staff. Nicole, I'm going to have you come join us if you are here. Yep. I can answer the big picture, but I'm going to have Nicole who can really kind of get into the details. Great.
And I'm going to keep it as non-technical and short as possible. So there are a lot of...
Yes.
Yes, I'm Nicole Ballinger. I'm a Buildings and Energy Strategic Advisor at OSC. Thank you. So there are a lot of flexible options that building owners can do. Really, one of the first things they should be starting with is just thinking about the energy efficiency. You know, the state has some requirements coming down the pike. That's a great opportunity to get started, get going. They can also do operational things. You know, make sure that they're saving energy. They're not wasting energy. And then there are things like upgrading to new equipment, you know, thinking about their asset plans, thinking about, I have something that's failing, maybe I want to transition this to a heat pump over time. So really just a number of different things. This policy does not prescribe any particular path, and that's an important thing about it, having all these different opportunities that they can choose that works best for their business case.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
And I will say, just to add to that, it does prescribe, however, the targets. So you have a lot of different ways to get there, but you do have to be achieving the emission reduction over the time period, which is through 2050. Okay, other questions? Nicole, you may need to stay up here, just in case. You all know I'm a transit nerd in my heart, so we can talk about that, but I'm going to rely on Nicole's expertise. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, John Ryan from KUOW. Mayor Harrell, many businesses and governments are aiming for zero emissions by 2050. Seattle's Green New Deal law calls for the city to aim for zero emissions by 2030. Why is this proposal so much less bold or ambitious than these other policies?
Yeah. I'll take a shot at it. Feel free to jump in. The first thing we always look at any target is, number one, are we addressing the sense of urgency? Then we have to look at, is the technology there now, or is it evolving in order to achieve that target? So whether it's transit emissions, whether it's our reliance on fossil fuel for other types of issues, whether it's our building standards, we just come up with what we think are realistic but aggressive goals, and we're not trying to put out there unrealistic goals. If I could give an example, if I've looked at recent administrations for the last 15, 20 years, they put goals out there. One, to reduce homelessness as an example. And it sounds sort of cool because you're kicking it down. And so when we try to establish our targets, I'm going to be around here in 2050. I don't know about you. I hope. I'm just But in all seriousness, is it achievable? So we think these are achievable. They're aggressive. Again, you know, there are competing interests in any kind of policy. We're also, and this is why this is a collaborative process, we also know that They are buildings that are vacant, and they're trying to find tenants and find new ways. We just had our conversion from office buildings to residential buildings, and we had some great ideas that we will act upon, and our regulatory framework will address that. So we think these are the right targets, they're aggressive targets, and it all ties into our overall climate strategy to reduce our emissions.
And if I could just add to that. Another element of this is really aggressive implementation. So while the target is over a period of time to 2050, one of the things we heard loud and clear from a whole variety of stakeholders was, put in place the incentives early so that we're able to start to do the conversions as soon as possible. And the good news is that we are in this place where there's been state action, there's been federal action. So one of the hallmarks of this program is that there are incentives for early adopters. So our goal really is to get people to decarbonize as quickly as possible, and we're driving incentives to help do that. Other questions? Yes.
Nicole, you mentioned the sort of flexibility that's allowed in the policy for these adaptations towards moving towards net zero. But one of those sort of points of flexibility is renewable natural gas, but it's well known that that still has the same level of public health harms as regular, like fracked methane gas. And so how have you and the city reckoned with that reality of the public health impacts of renewable natural gas as an alternative pathway towards compliance?
So why don't I start with kind of the big picture, and then Nicole can get into some of the details. So one of the things that's really important is that this is an emissions performance standard, right? So we're focused on the emissions part of it, and then are very deliberate in creating a variety of pathways to get there, right? So if renewable natural gas isn't really actually what's going to get you there, then you can't do it. On the other hand, if we get to a place where that is an option, we create that pathway. The second thing is there are a whole variety of legal and national implications for how we do this legislation. People are thinking about a whole issue around preemption, around utility regulation. And so to design this in a way that is legally defensible, it's really important to do it in a way that doesn't pick and choose winners. And so we've been really deliberate in saying the outcomes are what matters, and how you get there, flexibility, choice, that's really key. Nicole, do you want to add anything to that?
No,
Okay,
I would
thumbs
just
up.
add that, companies have their own social justice initiatives as well, and that they should be thinking about this whole policy within that construct. So thinking about what the opportunities is they have the flexibility.
Great. And you had another question. We'll do one more and then we'll move to you. Yeah.
One of the other sort of points of contention that's been evolving around this is the fine structure for non-compliance. So how do you think that the sort of fines as they stand now are sufficient to incentivize compliance from these like larger building owners that don't operate on like the tight margins that affordable housing deals with, and are they something that folks can just take like a slap on the wrist and then just like continue to emit?
So one of the things, again, I'll take kind of the big picture, and Nicole, you can chime in, but one of the things that we really leaned into in developing this policy is we now have a decade of experience in working with building owners through our tune-ups program and through our energy benchmarking program. We have some great staff here who work on that. And what we've found, and we have fines built into that program, but what we've found is it really is the early technical support. And I will also say, we have 95% compliance for that program. It's awesome. And so what we find is it's the early technical support and the early incentivization and being able to work with building owners. Every building is different. And so while the fines matter and we did design that into the program, our decade of experience in working with building owners is really that it's about the implementation and about working with them early. And you'll see that reflected in this program design. Because at the end of the day, the goal of this is to actually reduce emissions. And so that's why we're taking a really implementation-based approach to the fine design. Yep.
News Radio. Nicole had described that builders should think about energy efficiency as well as upgrading to new equipment. Some of those things may cost extra money. Is there anything in this policy that will prevent that extra cost from passing on to the renters who rent some of these properties?
So we went through an extensive stakeholder process with folks who are representative of tenants, people who are in affordable housing, we have building owners. And we really think we created a policy that has a long enough runway. Again, this is where this art of having the urgency around climate change, but also recognizing that the impacts could have financial impacts. And again, that's why I mentioned incentives early on. And so we have incentives that are developed for under-resourced buildings, for affordable housing. We are really concerned about tenant costs. But again, that's why this piece around financial support is really important, and these early incentives. We also have built in a somewhat longer runway for affordable housing so that we can recognize that the tenant costs are not something that we want borne by the individuals in a city that has a housing cost crisis. So those are some of the treatments that we think will smooth some of those concerns. And finally, we do have a kind of webinar at 1 p.m. So if there are more technical questions, we're happy to take those. So with that, we're so glad you came today, and we're looking forward to further conversation as this moves through the process. All right, thank you so much.